In Rich Motoko's article, The Nation's Wealthy Places Pour Private Money into Public Schools, Study Finds, published in the New York Times last year, he comments on the significant funding gap between schools in wealthier communities and schools in poor communities. Public schools in affluent locations tend to hold more bake sales, auctions, and fundraisers than other public schools. Private groups such as families and family businesses help raise and even donate funds to local public schools in wealthier locations. There's an inequality in that their donations have been raising an increasing amount of money for public schools in wealthier communities, creating an even larger gap in education and extracurricular activity funding in wealthier communities versus poorer communities. In Motoko's article, he compares a public school, Coronado, in a wealthy area to Lincoln, a public school in the poorer section of San Diego. The richer public school raised $1,500 a student in 2010 to fund art, music classes, sports medicine courses, and digital media 3D printers. Lincoln, where median household income is two-thirds that of Coronado, raised only $20 per student in 2010, which was seen in similar trends across the country.
Recent research showed that nonprofits by parents and community members tripled in number and quadrupled the dollars in 2010 since 1995, and were more likely to even have fundraising groups in the first place. Nonprofit funding in schools across the country have raised $880 million in 2010 compared to the $197 million in 1995. The government is attempting to equalize the gap between the public funding in the two locations by redirecting local property tax revenues. The more the property is worth in your location, the more public school funding your district has. Private funding is contributing enough money to public schools in particularly wealthy locations that if the private dollars across the nation were added up and divided evenly, every public school student would be funded around $28. But because the money from community foundations are only donated to chosen schools, students in schools like Coronado are given thousands of dollars per student, while poorer schools are given only dozens.
To compensate for declines in state funding, affluent schools in San Diego asked families to donate $1,200 per student, on top of the additional money being raised through auctions and telethons. Such fundraising is what keeps wealthier parents involved and committed to public schools versus sending their kids to a private school. At Lincoln, nearly all students qualify for free or reduced lunch, and through all their funding, they only raised $8 per student. Although many large cities with high populations of poor children have foundations that raise millions of dollars for public schools, this money is often put towards advertising and research in order to get their policies recognized, rather than assisting schools directly. It's better to have engaged parents supportive of public schools than sending their children to private schools where the extra fundraising is no longer in the public system. Our solution is to support a policy that assists schools directly and works towards equalizing the funding gap between district locations. We can do this through government policies that require percentage of all outside donations be sent to the state to be equally dispersed between all districts. Most of the donations and fundraising will be directly donated to the school, but with this policy, poorer schools with less outside donations are aided by the state. Although it is not a perfect solution, it is a good step towards school funding equality.